Ginny would like you to do is to introduce yourself and how, you were born here, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So when, when you were born, how long you've lived in Star, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Now?
And,
Yep.
you're just going to look at Dean and have a conversation with Dean the whole time.
All right. Okay, I was born March 21st of 1948 in St. Luke's Hospital. And we lived right around the corner at Highway 16 and 44. And I lived there. My great-grandfather had bought that property in 1912. And we had lived there with him. Mom took care of him. I think that I always felt I was very lucky to get to know my great-grandfather, because not that many people get to know their grandparents. So I never knew my grandmother, and so it was a special thing to have. He used to stick up for me a lot. When I was growing up. So I lived there my whole life, and it was good times. It was hard times, I remember, but it was good times. And it was a small enough community that everybody, you didn't do too many things wrong, because it was probably going to get back to your folks before you got back home. So we used to swim as kids. When we got old enough, we would swim in the mill slough, us girls. The Mossmans had 3 girls, and we would, at 2 o'clock, we met to go swimming. Sally, the oldest one, when she got her driver's license, she would bring the old Ford tractor down, and we would all pile on the Ford tractor, and she would take us down and we would go swimming. Before that, we all got on the old horse and rode the horse down and put him in the shade tree while we... And I remember they had a crabapple tree. And that was one of my treats, because I loved those crabapples. And if you got them a certain time of year, they were sweet and they were good. So we would go swimming. And we had to be home by 4 o'clock, because that's when American Bandstand started. So we had to be home so we could watch American Bandstand and do our dancing and whatever. And Roddy, the Mossman girls' cousin, that's where the mill slough went through at their house. And so Susie was younger than I was, and then Roddy was her older brother, and he was a couple of years older than me. And it was really funny, because he would get really mad at us, because you girls, you got to go and watch your rumple, he called it. So he would get really mad at us, and he was the only boy out of all of us, all of the neighborhood kids. So anyway, that was a good memory.
You said your great-grandparents, they had a farm. Mm-hmm. They bought property, and you spent a lot of time there. When was that? Do you know when they bought the farm?
That was in 1912 when they bought that. It went, there's a couple of drain ditches. It went all the way up. There was the Van Dusen place, and it went up to the Van Dusen place, to that ditch that it went through. And great-grandma was ill. She had a lot of heart trouble and everything. And so to pay the bills, he would sell off some of the land. But in 1912, he only paid $5,000 for all that land. I'm not sure. I think there was 100 and some acres at the time. And then he just ended up with 10 acres.
And your parents, were they farmers also, or what did they do?
Dad farmed. Mom was housewife for a long time. She worked at the telephone company when she was younger. I can remember her going back to work when I was small because she called one night. She called one night in the evening and talked to me. And I can remember that was a super special. I got to talk to Mom on the phone. And so, lost my train of thought. You better cut this off because I just went blank.
Well, I'll ask you another question, maybe a little.
Okay.
So, what kind of crops or livestock or whatever did your great grandparents, your grandparents' parents?
Dad just ran a few cows, and we had hay, and we had grain at times. So he would rotate the crops, and he milked a few cows, and we would send it to the Dairy Gold Creamer at Caldwell. And I can remember he made a cart so that he could take the cans out to the road because they would pick them up there. And he would wet down gunny sacks. And during the winter, or during the summer when it was hot, and he would wet down those gunny sacks to keep that milk cold. so that it wouldn't spoil before they would come and pick it up.
Did you work around the farm growing up?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you didn't just watch TV and we didn't get a TV until, oh golly, I was probably in the first, second grade before we got a TV. And probably the only reason we got a TV was because of Granddad. And everybody called him Granddad or Grandpappy. He was, that was his, I bet some people didn't even know what his name was. It was this Granddad. So I remember when I was young, he had I can't remember if it was a Model A or Model T Ford. And he took me down. He had to have a part made for that old car, and we went down to the blacksmith shop. And that's where he had to have that part made. And I got to ride with him. And I remember that was such a big deal to me at that time. So he passed away when I was in the 5th grade. And I was home, sick. I think I had had the bad flu, if I remember right. That was not my good year. My mom's mom had passed away in January. I had the flu that year. I had the measles that year. I had, and Granddad passed away in March. So that was a big, big year that I remember those things. And Mom had started working at the school lunch down here at Star. So Granddad had he always went to his son's during the winter and in Los Angeles, California. And so he had just come home and he was having trouble with his heart, and he was 85 at the time. And Mom was at work, and we had had lunch, and Granddad went into the living room and sat in his chair. And I think he was watching TV. And all of a sudden I looked at him, and his eyes were rolling back, and he was grasping for breath. And he kind of come out of it, and I said, "Granddad, are you okay?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine." And then he went into it again. And the only thing I could think of was to call Elaine Mossman, which she was a nurse and had been for. And so happened to be, we had the old party lines. She happened to be on the phone. And I said, "Elaine, come quick. Something's wrong with Granddad." And boy, she was down there in a flash. And he had passed away by the time she got home. But anyway, and I can remember they shuffled me, because Linda was home, and she was a year older than me. She was homesick too. So Frank come and got me, and I went and stayed with Linda while everything was done. But, so those are the things I think when you're a kid, they kind of hit you hard. You remember those things vividly. So, Jill Kirtley and our folks, were very good friends, and they ran around together, and they played cards, and they, I think, went dancing and everything, because everybody went to the Liberty Grange Hall. And as a small kid, you took the kids with you. And that was just accepted. You just took the kids with you. And I can remember I would get tired. And there was the stage. Have you been in that, Grange Hall?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool, isn't
The
it?
stage is there. It's nice.
So there was kind of some seating at the side of the stage. Mom would take coats and pile them up, and I would go to sleep. And then when they were ready to go, they'd come and get me. And I can remember dancing on my dad's feet. And so those were great times. Just great times.
That area up there, the Liberty Grange Hall, in an earlier conversation, you referred to it as the Liberty community. Mm-hmm. What all was up there?
Across the road, kind of kitty corner, north, there was a schoolhouse, an old schoolhouse. And I think it was probably just a one-room schoolhouse, and that was known as the Liberty community. My grandmother and great uncle went to that school when they was young. And I can remember Uncle Bud talking about the boys went out, because it had, like all those old schools, had the bell. And they, of course, didn't like the teacher. I remember they talked about it being a man, and he was mean, and they didn't care for him, so they tipped that bell up, filled it full of water, and he rang the bell, and he got wet. So I wish that they would have talked more about the experiences. Mom always talked about, because they always lived around Eagle area, and she always talked about the Upper Fairview. And I take it that was another community, maybe around Beacon Light above. And she would talk about during the winter, when there was a lot of snow, they would take the team and hook up the sleigh. And that's how they got places when there was a lot of snow. And she said her mom would heat rocks, and they would put them in the bottom of the sleigh and then put blankets, and that would heat so their feet didn't get really, really cold.
Genius.
So, anyway, when we were kids and Mom and Dad would run around with the Kirtleys, Bill and Betty, and Jill and I were born, not even a month from each other. I was born in March and she was born in April. And so we just grew up. I tell her we were crib buddies, I was sure. And I don't know who it was, but the old school hall down in Star, somebody from the roller drome would bring skates. And we would go on Friday nights, only on Friday nights. And they would bring the skates and we could go down and pay our money and skate for the evening.
This was in the old gymnasium?
No, that was in, well, there's shops in there now.
Yes.
And that, it's been many things. It was, Post had sales in there for a while, auctions. And it's just been a lot of, I can remember as a kid, we didn't have a gymnasium or anything at Star School. So we would have our Christmas plays and things like that. We would have it in the old school hall, they called it. Oh, when the gymnasium was built, I believe it was 1958, because I was in the 5th grade when they were building that. And so when I was in the 6th grade, we were the first class to get to use that gymnasium. So they still made us go outside. But we lived through it. We thought, oh, we got a gymnasium, we should be able to not have to go outside anymore. But anyway, my mom was down there till well, I guess I was probably in junior high when she went paralyzed. Then she had to quit down there. We had good school. I can remember the Hadleys lived up here, up the road from here, and Margaret, and she worked at the Star Merc for years and years, and she was the last one out of all the kids. She was the baby of the family, and her mom did not want to let her go. And Mrs. Turner, our teacher, she would bring Margaret to school, and she wanted to stay with Margaret all day. And there was one time she had brought her to school, and Mrs. Turner said, "You need to go." Well, she stood outside the hall and was crying. I know Mrs. Turner got really upset with her and said, "You need to go home." And you come and you drop Margaret off or put her on the bus, and that is it. You don't come anymore. So Mrs. Hadley finally she broke the ties with Margaret finally. And we all thought that Mrs. Turner was so mean. I can remember I confused, I would say 12, 11 when I was counting. I had those two backwards. And I can remember she had that ruler in her hand and she was beating on my desk saying, 11, 12, 11, 12. I learned it was 11, 12 because I wasn't too sure that my head wasn't going to be the next one. So just silly little things that you remember that just pop out.
So you went to school, to the elementary school in Star. Mm-hmm. And where did you go after that?
Eagle.
Okay.
We went through the 6th grade and then we did 7, 8, and 9th at Eagle. And then went to Meridian High for our high school years.
How did you get to school?
Bus.
Okay, to Eagle and to Meridian? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What was that like? I know growing up buses, I hear stories about being on buses. I know from my own growing up. I mean, things that happen on buses. Oh, yeah, okay. Do you want to tell us some of those?
Well, all went well through. I remember in junior high when we were coming home one evening, and it was slick roads. And I don't remember who our bus driver was at that time, but I remember it was a woman, and she goes, "Hang on, kids. We're going to get hit from the back end." Sure enough, this guy slid right into us. So, and then there was another time when we were in high school and we were coming down on Linder, and one of the kids got up in the and stood up when we were coming down that hill, and he just put his hands on both sides of the seats and was swinging. Typical boy. And bus driver slammed on the brakes coming down the hill. We came down that hill sideways. And he got her straightened out by the time we got to the bottom. And all the girls were squealing, and it was great fun. I'm sure I was scared to death.
You played, you mentioned the Mossman girls, and you went swimming, and what other kind of things did you do growing up?
Oh, horseback riding. We had horses. We would pack a little lunch and take off from their place, and we would follow the drain ditch bank. Sometimes we'd go fishing because there were carp and all sorts of stuff in the drain ditch. And we would just go explore for the day. There was, normally Sally was getting older and she didn't want to be with us girls. So it was normally Linda and Susie and I that would do that. And we'd grab a stick and go off, and we'd be gone all day, have our lunch, and we would play like we were explorers, and to us, we were exploring. So there was pastures, and every once in a while, I remember, I never wore shoes, and we were going through the pasture, and I stepped in a cow patty, and it was a fresh one. And I think Roddy was with us at that time, and he made fun of me, told me my feet were going to grow now. And just this stuff, we were just kids. We enjoyed being out and doing things. Just being kids.
Do you have any particular time of the year that season that you enjoyed?
Summer.
Out of school and running around?
So out of school and running around. Yeah. Sally had started, she had picked strawberries for Kwong's. And she had probably started driving by that time. And so the strawberries were really, really good this one particular year. And they were wanting kids to come and pick for them. So you were supposed to be 12 before. So I couldn't get a job with them because I was only 11 at the time. But I could go and pick on Sally's ticket. So Linda and I went and picked on Sally's ticket. So that was, and it was just, maybe 2 weeks when those berries were really. So the next year I was 12, so all us girls went and picked strawberries for Kwong's. And that was how we made our extra money. So, because you didn't make money around home, you got to live there. That's you had your responsibilities. So my job was to mow the lawn, and when it started out, it was not a power mower. It was one of those push rotary mowers, and we had a big lawn. So, and we had a lot of family that would come, cousins and different people. We always called them hamburger fry. And Mom would make this, it was kind of like a chili sauce, and they didn't know what to call it. And so it got labeled the goop. And so everybody would go, "Where's the goop? Where's the goop?" That's one memory. And my great-granddad had, he ended up working, he was a machinist, and he worked over at the PFE for the railroad as a machinist over at Nampa. So when he retired, he had to stay busy. So he would take his old Model A or T or whatever it was, and he would take off and go to the Waihees, and he liked rocks, and he would collect rocks of all kinds. And he finally decided, we just called it the trailer house. And when my mom and dad first got married, that's where they lived, was in this little trailer house, it was called. And all it was a square little shed type thing, and it had a sink and a cupboard, no bathroom. It had 1 or 2 chairs, a little kitchen table, and a bed, and I think a dresser I had in there. And so he had decided in later years, well, I'm going to fix that up. Well, it was kind of falling apart on the outside. So he made him some forms, and they were about like this. And he would mix his concrete, and I have his old wheelbarrow that he mixed his concrete in, and he would pour it in his forms, and then he would, as it dried, he would press his rocks in it. And then he ended up covering that whole building with these blocks that he had made. Then eventually he did the back of our house, about halfway up. And he went to Hawaii at one time, and he brought back all these seashells. And he made blocks out of the seashells. and he would put dates on stuff. So he'd take a piece of tin and he would probably chisel, kind of mark the date and everything. And that's how he would do things. You know, you didn't spend money, you used your brain. And just did it. So, good memories. Good memories from him.
Were there any community events or social events that happened here that you looked forward to?
We always had the carnival at school. As I got older, some of us, we would have parties at our houses. And they were always if you had a boy-girl party, that was a big thing. And they were very well chaperoned. And I remember Doug Willis came one time, and his dad was so comical, and he knew magic tricks and everything. Well, us girls, we wanted to dance. And old Sherm got to doing his magic tricks. And everybody got interested in magic tricks, and us girls didn't get to dance. And so I was very disgruntled with the whole. Sherm had ruined the party. So you look back at things like that. We didn't have a lot of parades and things like that back in the day. I can remember the ladies had what they called club. And once a month they would meet at someone's house and they would have refreshments and sometimes they would do some crafts or whatever was popular at the time. And mostly it was just work, I guess. I remember Elmer and Minor McClure on Saturday nights. The big thing was either we would go to their house, and they lived in Star there. Either we would go to their house or they would come to ours. And we would have hamburgers and soup. That was our Saturday night, hamburgers and soup. They would watch Lawrence Welk and Gunsmoke. And then they would go home. And Mom always kept, she called them refrigerator cookies. And I think she had got the recipe from Betty Kirtley. And you could make those things and put them in the freezer. And I can remember her, if we had drop-in company, which that happened a lot. People would just come and drop in and visit for a while. And I can remember Mom would, the house would maybe be messy, and where her chair was, she could see when people would come in the drive-in or to the driveway, and she would go, "Oh, pick the blankets up." And we had a front porch, and you kind of clean the house real quick. And so then pretty soon she'd lean over to me and she'd go get the cookies out of the freezer, turn the oven on, and she'd tell me what to turn the oven on. And she'd slip away and make coffee, and they'd have coffee and fresh baked cookies. And that was just a normal thing. So she always kept something in the freezer to feed the guests.
There were, I've heard of, there's some events that I heard of that some people look forward to. They had a weekly auction that they used to have. I don't know if that was going on when you were growing up.
That post down at the Star Hall. Uh-huh.
As that anything you ever went and hung out, see what was
Dad
going
and
on?
Dad and I would go down to the auction.
Is that something to look forward to?
Yeah, kind of. More, I think I would go with Dad more. I was a dad's girl. And so I really didn't want to be in the house doing the domestic thing. I wanted to be out with Dad doing those kind of things. So it was, I finally got a little domestic. It took a while. And that's finally when I started working at Star School, and that was about 84, I think. And I had worked for the state for years in law enforcement and driver's license. And quite a few years I worked. This was long before computers or anything, so the sheriff's offices and everybody, they would call in, and they would have a license plate number, and then we would give them the information. And we had the state cops right across the hall from us, and that was there on State Street that we were located. I think they've changed everything. Everything has changed now. But I remember one time, us and the state cops they were just fun guys, and the guys that were in the radio room, dispatch, they would take little breaks and they would come over and visit with us. And I probably mouthed off, said something to one of those guys, and he grabbed his handcuffs so quick that and he had me handcuffed to the file cabinet. He turned around and walked off. And I said, "What are you doing? Come back." He did after about 5-10 minutes, but there I stood. Then after I had my kids, I stayed home for a while, and then my marriage kind of fell apart, and so I ended up, tried to go back to the state, but my mom needed me close. She had gone paralyzed, and I just felt like I needed to be close in this area. So I had the opportunity to go to Star School and be custodian. So I took it, and that ended up to be a 23-year. And, God works in our lives and leads us places that we're supposed to be. And that's where I was supposed to be, evidently. So it was good years. Bad years, good years. You're somewhere for 23 years, you just go through the gamut. But it was all good. A lot of changes, with the Star School. I watched the old building be tore down, and that was hard. That's where I had gone all 6 of my years. So that one was hard for me. Of course, I'm the big sentimental person, but there's just down the road here along the mill slough, there's an empty little field there. That's where they put all the debris for that school. There's a lot of bricks under there. And when I think about, I saw it for sale, and I thought, I wonder what they're going to put there, because I don't know how many people really know that all that is buried there. So it might be a surprise for somebody someday. And then when, I don't remember what year it was, it seemed like, probably shouldn't say this, it seemed like they wasted a lot of money because they put new brick. When they put the gym on in '58, then they bricked that whole school. And then there wasn't that many years that they tore it all down. So I often wondered, why are we making these decisions? Joe Watson used to teach at Star, and there was always rumors that the old building was haunted, that there was kids that were running around, because there was a lot of kids that were passed away, as in any. And so we always teased the newcomers about the ghosts. And things would happen that you kind of wondered, And there was a lot of course, it was an old building, and there was a lot of creaking and everything. The PE teacher, Lynette Meyer, and I used to laugh, and she would say, "Did you move? Did you come in my room and move whatever?" And no, not me. So one time she said, I think it was her, said that she was there on the weekend, and she said, "I could have swore somebody was out in that gym playing basketball." And she said, "I opened my door," because her little room was on the side of the stage. And she said, "I opened the door and there was no one there." And we always kept the piano on the other side. And, they would say, "I heard piano playing. Who was back there playing piano?" So when they tore that down, Dennis and I happened to be coming down the road. And I said, "Oh, you got to pull over." So I text Lynette, and I said, "We watched the gym being torn down today, and I wanted to tell you that I saw the little ghosts packing their bags, and they're headed for your new gym." So now she's retired, so somebody else gets to.
Well, you've lived here a long time, and so you've seen a lot of changes to Star.
Yes.
People moving in. I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on that, good, bad, or otherwise, about how much Star has changed since you were young.
I hate it. I truly hate it. They have taken this wonderful little community that was a farming community. We have good land around here. We have good water. And they've made, Dennis says, human waste. All of these subdivisions are just human waste because they have taken our good farmland and good opportunities. I at one time said, "I wish I was a multimillionaire and could buy all this up, and all these guys, young guys that want to farm and can't afford it anymore, let them do it."
What do you miss most about it, about the changes?
Serenity. The amount of traffic, we live on this corner, and the amount of traffic that has come in, the disrespect of the laws, the speed limits, it's a disrespect, I think. And people talk about, well, this isn't right and that isn't right and everything. And us old timers think, you have gripes? Don't turn us loose on you. Because we'll tell you a thing or two.
Is there anything about the changes that you liked or look forward to, like new business coming in or paved roads or anything like that?
I was fine with the roads not being paved. I mean, I guess they've always been, the main highways have always been paved from my time. I can remember as a kid them redoing Highway 16, and that was kind of a novel thrill to get to watch the big carryalls and things like that. But that was a short time thing, and the corner down there at 16 and 44 has changed so much. It was just a big Y, with in the middle of the Y was tules growing in the middle of it. And you look at it now and you would never know. I wish I had a picture of what it used to look like. No, I just, they talk about the drive-ins coming and things like that. And Dennis and I have talked about it. And I said, well, I hope they bring in Arby's. If they're going to do this, let's have something worthwhile. But everyone has their own wishes. That's who wants to come. And that part is kind of nice, but it's just because we're older and we like the convenience. It's nice if you don't feel like cooking, to go down and get something quick. So.
You were born here, and you also raised a family here. Mm-hmm. How was it to raise your family? I mean, how many kids do you have?
Two.
Two.
Mm-hmm. We lost our boy in 21, and to COVID. He played baseball, and the coach, there was a lot of controversy. I really didn't appreciate how do I put this? Too much competition. And it was starting, we have had an influx. When I worked for the state, for law enforcement in the 70s, we had a big influx of people then. Then it kind of leveled off a little bit. And now we're having the big. Not that I don't blame a lot of the people that are coming from the southern states. I wouldn't want to live in that either. But you can't flood an area that's kind of innocent. The farm ways, whatever you want to say, it takes a big hit on that community. I have noticed that there are many, many good people that have come into this area. But they still are not the farm people. They're different. And it's hard to, they kind of get their hackles up, and it's hard for them to understand how we feel.
I can understand that. But for you, it's a good place to raise a family?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. Definitely. My daughter is first grade teacher over at Chaparral at Meridian, and has been for 25 years. Yeah. Good times for the kids. The community was still small, and that's what Julie and I were talking last night, and she said, I said, when you were born, we lived in Boise on Pleasanton. And I said, when you were born, I had decided I did not want you to be raised in Boise. She looked at me, she goes, thank you, Mom. So, yes, that was my main. I wanted to bring my kids back to where I was raised and have them have the kind of life that I had. And she lives in Middleton, and she raised her kids in the same environment. So it's a good tradition for us. We're running out of those spots fast, and that makes me very sad. And there's so many people, Dennis and I have talked, and as many of our age, we have talked about, well, maybe we should just sell out and move. And then we all look at each other and go, but where? Idaho is our state. It's our home. We either fight it, which is what's used, or you give into it and try to keep it as small as you possibly can. It's kind of how it is.
You still have a lot of friends here, though. I mean, do you still see the people, a lot of the people you grew up with?
Yeah. We go to lunch every once in a while. Dennis plays poker on Wednesdays with, I call them the old cronies, but with my sister's husband and his brother, which I graduated from high school with his brother. In fact, we were candle lighters at our brother and sister's wedding. And yeah. It's just a community of guys that have got together and heckle each other and play a little poker, and they meet over at Jerry's house. And so, yes, we do. And the kids that have graduated, there's a lot of us gals that we've just stayed in touch. We've been friends forever. And get together and have lunch or stay. That's one nice thing about Facebook. You get to stay in touch. There's many bad things about Facebook, but there's a lot of good things. When I met Dennis, he worked out on Shimya Island and at the end of the Aleutian chain. And we got married in 2007, and no, 6. And I quit the school in 2007, and he got me a job out there because you have to work out there to be out there. And it's just a small island. And so I went out with him. So we would work 3 months and have 1 month off. Well, I did that for 3 years that I was out there. Oh, that's the furthest I'd ever been, away from Idaho and my little town. It was strange. When we landed, and I looked at all of this, because it's got ocean all the way around it. That is 2 miles wide and 4 miles long. And I kind of looked at him and I said, "Where did you bring me?" And the saying is, it may not be the end of the world, but you can see it from here. And it's only 400 miles from certain parts of Russia, so it's way out there. But so that was a whole new experience for this Idaho girl. Scary, truly scary at times.
But you came back home.
I did. Every 3 months, I couldn't wait to get back home. And to be away from a place that you have grown up, you know everybody, it's really strange. I said to my sister one day, something about, have you heard from anything about Frank Mossman? And I said, I haven't heard anything about him. And she goes, oh, I think he passed away. And that was like, when you're that far away from a place that you've always been, time is supposed to stand still at home. You don't expect things to happen. It's a weird feeling. I can tell I'm heading home for you.
You are. I raised my kids in McCall, and I know what McCall means for them. I moved a lot when I was a kid. I did not have that anchor that they had, but they got to literally grow up in McCall. And yeah, we talk about that, so I know what
Yeah.
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 I think we're in pretty good shape, unless...
I'm gonna have you talk to Dean still, but you said your favorite time of year is in the summer. Is there any I don't know, from even maybe growing up, just maybe smells, sights, sounds, things like that that you can speak to? But I'll have you talk to Dean.
Smells. You know, on Facebook, they'll say, what's your favorite smell? I have a girlfriend, Ellen, and she was raised up on Homer Road, pretty much. My favorite smell is cow poop in a milking barn. And she says, mine too. Only hers is horse poop, because she was raised with horses. And Dennis used to laugh at me because when we would pass the dairy on Star Road there, and you can tell a difference between a cattle yard and a milking cows. And I said, oh, smell that cow poop. And he said, are you crazy? I said, no, it smells different. Just smells different. And I said, I'm sure it's what they feed them, but it smells different. So yeah, that's it. That green grass being mowed, fresh mowed, all those things that a country kid, you look back on your life, and that's what a country kid grew up with and loved. This is how it was.
You had a lot of fields around here too. Like I know, I'm not sure about here, but parts of town, you had mint. If you're over on the east side of town, you had the mink farms. I don't know if you ever were downwind of those.
Oh yeah, yeah. We were in the prevailing winds. And in the evening, because our house was right in line for the mink, and it wasn't as Marilyn, their daughter, and I were in the same and the same class, and so her and I got to be really good friends at one time, and so I went home with her, and they were pelting at the time, and she wanted me to come in and watch them. I got as far as the door, and I went and turned right around, and I said, I can't do that. But she explained to me, she said, it's not the mink that stink, it is the what they feed them that stink. But yeah. And they always, they had a bunch of hounds. And I can remember as a kid, I would wake up in the middle of the night, and some of those mink would get loose. And there was a grove of cottonwood trees across the field, and across the road, and way back in the field. And you'd hear those hounds. They would be after one of those mink or something, and they'd be baying, and that's what you would wake up to in the middle of the night. Those goofy things. So, yeah, it was. I remember Marilyn, the old red barn down there at their. She got on the bus one day and her leg was in the cast, and I looked at her and said, "What happened to you?" She goes, "I fell out of the loft of the barn and broke her leg." So she wore the cast for a while. And from what I understand, I don't know if she still is, she was in northern Idaho and a vet.
Jenny, was it your grandfather or your great-grandfather that you lived with?
Great-grandfather.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So every time when you talked about your grandfather, you meant your great-grandfather?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And for the record, your great-grandfather's farm was out in that Liberty community area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I understand the land that the Liberty Grange sits on, he donated to the Grange Hall?
Yes, he did. Mm-hmm.
And I think you said you recall when you were young watching them put the roof on that building sometime in the,
I would say early 50s, early to middle 50s. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure. And I don't think I've ever heard when it was actually built. And I don't think that Mom and Dad, I don't ever remember it not being there. So I do remember when it was first built, it didn't have bathrooms inside. And I don't know if they're still there, but there was the men's and women's outdoor houses out there. And so when somebody had to go to the bathroom, they trotted out into the outhouse. And I was really surprised when they finally put bathrooms on the inside. And they went in and redid the floor. And this was after I'm not sure what year that was. My granddaughter was, she went to Eagle Middle School. And so their choir did a special, Christmas special. And it happened to be at the Grange Hall. So I was ecstatic that I got to go into that. I remember going to Grange meetings, and it was so formal. And they had I was trying to remember the other day what a plaque or something that was on the wall. And when someone that was a member passed away, they had a kind of like a scarf, a black veil, and they would put that, arrange it over this plaque that they had lost someone. And I always thought, because I remember asking my mom, why is that there? And she told me. And I always thought, oh, that's cool. That's neat. So that was the meeting place for many things. I know that I'm not sure if this was with the Grange or not, but I can remember Mom talking about, they had a party up there, and all the women would take their shoes off and they'd pile them in the middle of the floor. And then the women would sit on the stage, and they would bring they had kind of a screen type thing. And so their feet were hanging out. So the men had to go and find their wife's shoes that they had wore and pair it to the feet. Well, it was always easy for Dad because Mom, her little toes, one lopped on both sides, they lopped over the next toe. So it was always a cinch for Dad.
As long as he could find the shoes.
So that was one thing about that Grange Hall. Just cool. But anyway, they had redone that floor. It had a beautiful wood floor.
And it still is beautiful. I toured it last year this time. It's beautiful. They put in a heating system and a basement where they put in the heating system.
Uh-huh.
And upgraded the electricity stuff so it all passed code. Everything was a well-done job,
Uh-huh.
which is why it's easy to move and to use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, my son and the neighbor boy, Greg Dancer, his folks had gone somewhere for the weekend, and Greg came and stayed with us. He and Bart were pals at the time. Frank Mossman called me up and he said, Jen, I think the boys shot the windows out in the Grange Hall. And I said, oh, Frank, they would not do that. Well, I kind of think they did. He said, the windows have been shot out in the Grange Hall. Well, I called my mom and I was talking to her, and she visited with Dad, and she called me back and she goes, your dad saw the boys down there and they had their BB guns. And we grilled those boys and grilled them. And nope, we didn't shoot those out. So finally I took Bart to the bedroom, and I thought, well, I'm gonna do a shot in the dark on this one. And I said, Bart, I know you shot those windows out in that Grange Hall. I did it, Mom. I said, uh-huh. He goes, you didn't know? And I said, nope. He goes, you tricked me. And I said, all's fair. Love, war, and raising a kid.
Jenny, what did your son do?
Well, for years, about 10 years, he worked for Idaho Concrete. And then before Dennis retired, he got him a job out there on the island. So that's where he was working at the time that he passed away, was out on the island
Up in Alaska.
in Shimya.
So they got COVID up there in the great outdoors.
Oh yeah, well, somebody brought it out,
Okay.
but, well, I won't go into that now.
Is there anything that we should know that we haven't talked about?
Oh golly.
You've got days more of things you could tell.
You know how things, you're kind of like a babbling brook, and we're probably not to the end of the brook yet. But right now, nothing really, things will always pop into my head, but nothing outstanding, I guess, at this time.
Well, I would suggest with your interest in history, like you had the friend who drew the map, if you think of things, you ought to write them down. They'd be of interest to people when the museum gets...
And just call me, because I'll be helping them collect things for the museum.
Okay. Well, and I have stuck it somewhere, but I haven't. Irene and her brother, one of them, before they passed away, they had just written down a lot of stuff about Star, and I will find that. It's pages.
Oh, that would be great.
And
That'd be wonderful.
he talks about, I'm not sure if it was Ed or Tony, which one it was. One of them, Doc House, he was sheriff, Ada County Sheriff for a little while. Anyway, he talks about the jail at Star, and he spent a night in that jail.
That little jail.
Yeah.
You've seen the jail.
Yeah. I guess he spent a night in there. I don't know. I don't remember. He says what he did, but yeah. So, yes, when I find that paper, I will.
Just give me a call.
I'll make another copy of it.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
because it is a wealth of information. They talk about planting trees around the old, was it Central Park? No, not Central Park. The school, that they planted those trees, a lot of them, that is around that. But they talk about that, and they lived up on Hill Road, because that's where Mom's grandparents lived. And that's where I don't know if they bought that or homesteaded it. They started in Meridian and then they moved. And they tell about being there and starting that. And Mom said she remembers, she always just called him Grandpa. And their last name was House. And she said, I remember him growing tobacco during the summer and the tobacco hanging in the garage or in the barn.
Dry cured.
Because they had a passel of kids, so. And I remember my granddad, my mom's dad, he talked about when they were kids and they were playing baseball. And he said, Mom called us in for dinner, for supper, and he said, we went ahead and played. Well, one accidentally hit another one in the head with the bat. Of course, knocked him out. Well, they thought they'd killed him. And so they drug him into the cornfield. And so and he said, then when we went in for supper, his mom was doing the head count, and she says, "Where's so-and-so?" "Well, we don't know." Well, pretty soon he walked in. He had come too. And he said, "Man, did we get in trouble for that one?"
You would think so.
So, anyway, yes, many, many, many little stories.
Well, it's good to hear them, and I trust you'll continue to collect them.
Yeah.
And
Hopefully, I was on the foundation board for the Virginia Museum of Natural History for many years, and their archives are archived. So hopefully our museum will get an archivist that can archive things properly and also have them in original documents in a room that preserves things for humidity and good air and things. I would hope that we would get, we would do things the way we should do things.
Mm-hmm.
So the things we collect
That would be great.
are preserved well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had given Jackson stuff. There's an old milk pitcher. And because when I first went to school, they didn't have a lunchroom per se, and they had an annex to the south. And we would file out, and they did lunch in there, and it was just tables and chairs, and we had real glasses, and they had these big white pitchers, and they would pour our milk, and they trusted us with fork, knife, and spoon. And I remember a few times there were peas flipped up on the ceiling. Just funny things like that. And I think my mom started working at least part-time when that was there. But that was probably when I was the first, second grade that went on. Well, I guess it would have had to have been until they got the lunchroom done, come to think about it. Mm-hmm. I do remember a little gal named Chrissy Hatch. She was younger than me, and it was cold outside. Chrissy went out, and we had the old flagpole out there, and she put her tongue on that flagpole. Then she panicked, and she pulled.
Oh, no.
Bless her heart.
That hurts to hear it.
Oh. And she was her grandma was Stillwell, Mary Stillwell, which I'm sure Mary's name has come up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh. I've often wondered where Chrissy went.
Medical doctor.
well, Ginny, thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
I've enjoyed hearing the stories, finding out more about Star. It's been delightful.
Well, I feel like I really haven't said that much about Star, but
But these were stories of how you grew up, though, and this is good.
Which tell the story of Star.
Yes.
that's true.
And when we weave them together with other people's stories.
There. Yeah.
And it would be really cool to hear because we all perceive things differently. So
Yeah.